Hello and welcome to another episode of Advanced WordPress Theme Development. In the previous video, we learned about how to set up the ESLint, and now we're going to talk about creating nested blocks using the InnerBlocks. So what are these nested blocks? If you take a look on the WordPress org, it talks about that you can create a single block that nests other blocks using InnerBlock component. Now, why would I even need that? Let's take a look at our example. So we're trying to build a to-dos block, which is the parent block, and then it will contain a group block. Inside of it, we'll have column blocks, and then further down, we will have the do's and don'ts, which will be the heading, the block that we have created, the custom ones, and then there will also be some list blocks. So it's a parent-child relationship. You have blocks that are nested within blocks, right? So that's when we are going to use the InnerBlocks to create the nested blocks. And how do we do that? Let's take a look at what are these InnerBlocks. So InnerBlocks export a pair of component which can be used in block implementation to enable nested block content, right? So if you take a look, there is an InnerBlock component that you can pull from the block editor, and then inside of the edit function you can use it, and then you can use this in the save method as InnerBlocks.content. What will happen is that whatever the content of InnerBlocks is will then be saved inside of the database. Okay, so you get some of the options as well. For example, you can mention what are the blocks that are going to be allowed in that. So all of the blocks have their namespace and the name. In this case, it's core image, core paragraph. So you can pass an array of what blocks should be allowed as the InnerBlocks, and then you can also go ahead and pass the template inside of the template property. So the template can contain, like for example, in this case, we have the parent block as columns, and then inside of that you have two column 1 and column 2, and inside of the column, the first column contains image and the second one contains paragraph. So you pass that in form of an array, right? And you can also lock the template as well, so that if you are giving it to your client, or they shouldn't be able to delete any of them accidentally if you're trying to build a particular design, if you're trying to implement a design and you don't want them to delete it. Okay, so all of this information is present. I'm going to add that here into our repository. So you can go into imranhsayed, make sure you follow me on GitHub, and the repository is Aquila, and we can go to projects, which is where I have added all the information, and then you can go to the Gutenberg section, and this is where we can add it, like InnerBlocks. Okay, and then I'll add the link over here for you. All right, so this will be pretty useful, all the information. All right, so let's continue. So with that knowledge, we're going to build a custom block, and I'm going to go to my code, and I'll go to source, then I'll go to JavaScript, which is JS, Gutenberg, blocks, and then create another one, and we'll name it as do's and don'ts. Okay, inside of this, I'm going to create, in fact, I'm just going to copy the code from here, the index and edit, and then just edit it, because I have already taught you how to create the custom blocks, so you must be familiar with this. And then I'm just going to change the stuff over here basis our needs. That'll save us some time. Okay, so the name of our block will be Aquila Blocks. That'll be the namespace, and the block name will be do's and don'ts. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the icon map. We don't need it. I'll just go at the bottom, remove that as well. Let's remove this. And the name over here will be do's and don'ts. Okay, and then this will be the namespace, and in the description we can say add heading and text. Okay, what will be the icon? I'll go with the editor table icon. You can have any icon from the dash icons. And for the category, we'll keep it to Aquila, which is fine. And then inside of the attributes, we won't have anything because we're just using a bunch of inner blocks, so it will automatically use its own attributes inside of those blocks, so don't need to worry about that. And inside of the save, again, we don't need these attributes. We are not doing anything custom here. And inside of the return, I'm just going to name it as Aquila do's and don'ts. And I'm going to get rid of this because we no longer need the rich text. Okay, and I'm going to come back to the save in a moment. In fact, let me just do that. So if you remember in the nested blocks, in the inner blocks, it says that in the edit function you can use inner blocks, and then in the save you can use innerblock.content. InnerBlocks.content. So I might as well just use that over here. Okay, and of course you have to import it. So where is it available? It's available in the block editor, right? So I'm just going to replace the rich text with the inner blocks because that's what we need. Awesome. So our index is done, and then let's go out to our edit function and just modify it according to our needs. So we no longer need the rich text and the inspector control, so I'm going to get rid of that and use inner blocks instead. And I'm going to get rid of these icons, rich text, we don't need that. We'll get rid of the inspector controls. Yep, we don't need the icon, so let's get rid of that as well. We also don't need the set attributes, class name, so let's get rid of that as well. So what we really need is just the inner blocks, which is this. Okay. If you want to use class name, you can, but I'm not using it. All right. And so what are the things that we can pass inside of it? So if you go down, you can see that there are some allowed blocks. So I'm going to do allowed blocks, and then I'm going to create an array. For now, let's just say I want core group block because I want the parent block to be group. So I'm just going to pass the allowed blocks here. Okay. Let's get rid of the panel body, radio control. We don't need all of that stuff. And and also we need the template basically, right? So how do we get the template? What I'm going to do is, okay, first of all, let's lock our template. Okay, and then I'm going to come back to the template. So template, so it needs a template over here. I'm going to create one. Const template equals. Okay, so this template is going to be an array, all right? So how it works is that the first one is going to be an array again. So if you notice, this one is an array, this parent one. So you're going to add an array. So whenever you want to add any of the inner blocks, you have to first create the parent array, and then inside of this you can have as many blocks as you want, like this. You can have like this. All right, so I'm just going to have one of them as parent, so this will be this one, and then you can put the name as core group. Okay, so for the group block, it's the core group, and then we can pass in attributes. So first parameter is the namespace and the name of the block, and second parameter will be whatever attributes you want to pass to the block. So I want to pass class name, and let's name it as Aquila do's and don'ts, and then I'm gonna use the BEM methodology, and also let's keep it. And third one is that if you want any child blocks or not. So let's continue with just this group block and see how that goes. I'm going to just do npm run dev, And I'm also going to need to import this block into the blocks. So I'll come in over here inside of the blocks and then import it. Gutenberg blocks do's and don'ts. Perfect. Okay. And then I'll come back to my editor and I'm going to get rid of all of this do's and don'ts. And then I'm simply going to look for that block. You can see now we have this do's and don'ts, and I've also got the icon that I added, and that's it. This is my group block, and now if I check, this is the group block here. Now the thing is that inside of this group block, I want to be able to have the columns. Yeah. So in order for me to add columns, I need to add another block inside of it. So the third parameter will be for any child blocks that you want to have. So this will be an array, and then again simply you can pass multiple arrays of blocks that you want. So 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's go with the first one. Okay, so this is going to be core columns, and then again this will have the attributes. So class name, and I'm going to name it as Aquila do's and don'ts column. And you can also give width to the column. So I can give width of 49, so it'll be 49%. So basically I want 2 columns, so I can simply I don't want width. Okay, and then so this is my columns, this is the attributes, and again I want 2 columns inside of these columns, right? So I can do like this. Now if you notice, this is getting really this can get really untidy and messy. Now if you notice, this can get really messy, array within the array, and then within the array, and within the array, and so on and so forth. So what I'd like to do is that I want to hide the complexity. So for that, I will rather break these into constants and then use them. This will also allow me to have the reusability, and plus my code will look cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I will create a file called inside of do's and don'ts, and I'll name it as templates. And then I'm just going to say export const block columns equals, and then I'm just going to copy these entire column, this one, and I'm going to paste it here inside of the templates, right? So this way I've hidden the complexity, and then I can just use this variable over here and just import it on top. Import block columns. So this way I've hidden the complexity. This looks more cleaner, and I know that this is my namespace and the name of the block, this is my attribute, and these are my child blocks. Now I can simply work in that child block, and then I can break them down. This looks way cleaner, right? I'm sure you'd agree. So let's continue. So what we really want is that, again, inside of the columns you want 2 columns, so core column 1, core column 2, right? So for that, again, I'm going to hide the complexity of the child block, and I'm just going to create a function on top, because each of the column block may need different parameters. So I'm just going to say const. Okay, let me zoom it in for you. Const get block column, because remember that each column can have different title and different icon. So I want to keep it dynamic. So option val, which is for option value, column class name, they can have different class names also. Not that I'm going to use it, but I'm just telling you that it's possible. And they can have different headings, right? So there you go. And then this is going to return this array. Okay, so I've hidden the complexity now. So basically, in fact, not this array, but the array of blocks it's going to contain. But I can just do like, because I need 2 blocks here, so I'll say get block column do's. I'm going to pass the option val as do's, and then the class name as Aquila do's and don'ts column 1. And then heading will be do's. And the second block will be the same, but this time it'll be don'ts 2, and this will be don'ts. Okay, so as I explained to you earlier, that this third parameter is actually where you can pass multiple child blocks, right? So you can pass multiple child blocks in form of an array like this, your first one, second one, third one, and so on. That's exactly what we're doing, yeah? So we're just calling this function, which is going to return an array, and every time it's going to be different because we're passing different values. So for us, it's going to be the parent columns, and inside of which we'll have 2 columns. So we're just going to name them now. So let's name it. So it will be core column. Notice this is column and not columns. Columns is the parent. Second parameter, as you all know, is going to be the attribute. So we'll say class name. And instead of hard coding it, I can use the dynamic value, which will be different each time. And then, like you already know, can you guess what will be the third parameter? Yes, the third parameter will be the child blocks, and which will be an array. It's as simple as that. So now inside of this, I can have multiple child blocks, 1, 2. So what do I want to have? I want to be able to have a heading, and then I want to have the list. So remember that we are trying to build a block over here which has 2 columns, column 1 and column 2. And the first column, there'll be a heading, which is our custom heading block with the icon, and then the list. Same thing goes for the second one. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have 2 blocks as the child of the first column, and the second column as well, of course. So now inside of this array, you need to have the name of the block. So remember that the custom block that we have created, we have named it as Aquila blocks heading. So that's what we're going to use. And then second parameter, like you guessed it right, it's the attribute. So class name, and we can give it a class name of Aquila do's and don'ts heading. And there will be some more parameters, like for example option, because remember that the custom block that we created has 2 attributes: the content, which will decide what goes inside of those headings, and the option, which decides what icon will be used. So you can pass in attributes directly, so you can like override them or do all of that from the child blocks. So let's do that. So inside of the template, option will be, let's say, in fact, option will be dynamic, because the first time it will be do's and second time it will be don'ts, and that's what we are passing over here, remember? Okay, great. And the third thing will be the content. Again, content will be dynamic, so that will be the heading that we are passing from here. So the first time is do's and second time is don'ts. And I'm sorry, the option is coming from here. This is do's and don'ts. Okay, great. And will heading have a child block? No, it won't. It's just a block. So I don't need to pass the next parameter here. I can just leave it like that. So now comes the second block, second child, and this will be core list. And then class name, and class name will be just list. It's up to you if you want to skip these class name. If you don't want to style them, it's completely fine, but I'm just letting you know that you can pass attributes. So now you can see it looks much cleaner, right? And I forgot a semicolon here. Okay, great. So now coming back, just to recap, let's take a look. We're passing a template. The parent one is the group. Then you have columns, which is this. And then you have the class name, and then you have two child blocks, which is the columns. And then this column again have two child blocks, which is heading and the list. So let me show that to you in action. Let's refresh the page. And I'm going to say do's and don'ts. Congratulations. You can now see that you've got them side by side. And let's also fix the class name. So class name is Aquila do's and don'ts. Let's do that. Okay, I'm going to look for do's and don'ts. There you go. Congratulations. So you've got this block available. Let's update it. And if you notice that you have the do's and don'ts block, and then you have the group. So let me navigate through. Let me take you through this, how this is working. So let's call it inner block template instead of block template. Inner block template. Okay. So this is the group block, right? You can see this one right here. And then you have the class name. So if you inspect element, there you go. Let's search for this class name. You can see that the group block has this class name. Yep. Similarly, the other blocks will also have the class name. So you've got the group. Then inside of it, you have block columns. Let's take a look. So block columns, you have columns. So this is columns. Yeah. Then you have inside of that, you have two columns, 1 and 2. How are they coming? They are coming from here, from this function. So this function is responsible to render this entire column. So that's what we have, column 1 and column 2. And inside of these columns, you have the heading. So you can see there's a custom heading block. Yeah. And then you have the list block. So you can see this is the list one. Yeah. And you just have two of them, right? You can also navigate through them by clicking on select. And now you can use the arrow key to navigate through each of the blocks. Yeah. So notice how do you know that navigation is happening? Well, take a look at the right side. This is going to change, and notice it changes at the bottom as well, right? So I'm going to go, you can see this is group block. It says on the right. Then you have columns. It says down at the bottom, and then it also says on the right. Then you have the first column. It says here and says here as well. And then you have the heading with icon. You can see that's changing. You go one step down, you have the list, and then you can go further and so on and so forth. Yep. Awesome. So you can navigate through that. Let's go back to the edit mode. Now the problem is that I'm not having the color by default. Of course, I can click on this group block and then I can add the color from here like so, but I want the color to be there beforehand, so it just looks kind of better. So there are several ways to do it. First, either you go ahead and style it the way you want to, and then just go over here and click on the code editor, take the code and create the block patterns and just use it, so all of the layout, the color, everything is available straight away. So that's one way of doing it, which I've explained in the previous videos where we discussed the block patterns. However, since I'm building a custom block, I want to have the ability to add the background as well. Now, where is this background saved? Well, you know that these things are saved in the block attributes. But how do I know what the attribute would look like? Of course, class name, I knew the class name because in the previous video I know class name is available in the attribute. But each block can have different attributes besides the common one. So how do I know what that is going to be? Well, there are different ways to check that out. The first one would be if you go to, let's say, core blocks, and then you look for the group block, which is this one, and click on the block.json, you can see what options you have available here. Okay, but sometimes again you may not be able to get the exact attributes. The best way to find that, if you ask me, then is to parse that block. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to my function. I'm going to go to my functions.php, and over here down at the bottom I'm going to say my post equals get post. It's just for testing purposes, and the post ID is 203. I'm going to pass that, and then sorry, I'm sure it happened with you as well, that you're writing JavaScript and then you're switching between PHP. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to say parsed blocks equals parse blocks. This is a parse block function in WordPress. I can do my post, and then I can do arrow the content, sorry, post content. Okay, and then I just print it and see what happens. If you refresh, you can see that you can know what the blocks are there for this post, what has been saved. You have this main block, do's and don'ts, which we have just created. Then inside of that you have inner blocks. You can see the parent one doesn't have any attributes because we didn't pass any, did we? We didn't, because there are no attributes. But the core block does have attribute, and there is our answer that lies, right? So the core block not only has class name, and of course class name is something that we passed over here, right? We also have the background color, and that's how we get to know what to pass. So I'm going to go and pass background color, and what is it? Cyan bluish gray. Of course you can choose a different color and the value will change, but let's stick to this one for now. Similarly, there are other blocks as well which have different attributes, but we don't need to worry about them for now. That's all we needed, but yeah, you can find it this way. So let's get rid of the function that allows us to check our attributes which were used, refresh it, and now if I open the block again, there you go, congratulations, you've got that color selected automatically. Isn't that brilliant? Awesome. And then of course you can add some styles to it, which I will probably add that. I'll go on to the source SAS blocks, and I will create another file, and I'll name it as do's and don'ts.scss, and I'll just add some styles. Okay, so this is the style that I've added, just given some margin, and of course you have to import that style. So I'll go to blocks.css, and then I'm going to import those styles here. So I'll say blocks, and then I'll say do's and don'ts, and that's it. Let's take a look, go back. Hello, hi, you can just keep typing. Update it, refresh it, and there you go. Now you've got some styling, it's aligned in the same line. And now if you go back and check the post, there you go, congratulations, you've got your post over here, and you can clearly see that it looks almost the same as the backend, and you've got your block do's and don'ts. Of course you can choose a different color if you want from here as well. Okay, you can go for this color as well, whichever you like. Awesome, this is great. So I hope you did like the video. If you did, please give a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Do star my repository to support my work. My repository is Aquila, and do follow me on GitHub as well as Twitter. Both my GitHub and Twitter handle is imranhsayed. And just one last thing before we go, just to let you know, you can also add the width to these columns also. So if you want each of these columns to have different width, you can add width and then 49 over here. For example, this will be 49% each. This could be 33% each, and you can also pass the dynamic value over here, and then it'll pick up that width accordingly. All right, brilliant, awesome. This is great. In the next video, we're going to set up the style lint, because we did set up the ESLint. We haven't done the style lint yet, so we're going to do that in the next video. All right, perfect. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye bye.